So basically last time what we did was try to create a file called process.registration.php. So process.registration.php enables us to save user information on our members table. Now this time what we're going to do, since we are already created our members members table as well as members registration, and we're also able to redirect it on our index page, uh, we're going this time to create our login page. Okay, so let me try to open first my shopping cart page. So we have here, I'm currently on my registration page. So if I'm going to click home, I'll be redirected to my login page. So this is actually login existing account. So the user will be able to log in if they have existing user account. Otherwise, they need to go to register. Now let's try to go back here, home. Now, the very first thing that we need to do is we need to create another set of AJAX code as well as another set of files. Okay, so let's try to open index.php since index.php is where we can find our login page or login form. So we have our email address then as well as our password. So let's try to add this time our ID. The ID is equals to email address. Okay, then for password, okay, for password, okay, ID is equals to password. Okay, next, for our login button, decide to add our ID. Okay, button login. Now, since we already have our header, let's try to open our header. And our header already contains our jQuery file. Let's try to create this time our button. Okay, so script language JavaScript script. Then we have button login on click function. Okay, so let's try this time to add our email address. So for our email address, okay, let's try to create a variable email underscore address equals to dollar email address dot val and var password equals to dollar password dot val. Okay, so this one will actually store the values we entered on our email address as well as our password. Now, let's just try to be lazy this time. Okay, going back to our registration page, open, try to open, go scroll down. What we need to do is just try to copy this part. Okay, let's try to copy first. Okay, copy everything, then try to go back here to our index page. Okay, so since basically we will only be asking for email address and password, we can just delete the rest. Okay, so let's first try to copy and paste it here. Copy and paste it here. Also notice, by the way, that I have alert notice. So going back to our registration page, okay, try to copy this section as well. Okay, copy, go back here, okay, then paste it somewhere on top. Now, let's try to erase the rest of the page that we don't need up until contact number. Okay. So, no. Up from this one up until this part. Okay, so up until there. So, password, email address. Okay. Let's try it out later. So, Next thing that we need to do is to try to create a file called process.login.php, much like what we did with our process.registration.php. So I'm going to create a file, then new. Okay, let me just try to save first. File, then save as. So I have to select for PHP file. Okay. Process.login.php. Okay, so we already have our process.login.php. Okay, let's try to open this. Let's try to open this file again, and let's try to be lazy. Okay, let's try to copy this part on the upper part. So it will actually check if again connected PHP is included on our process.login. Let's try to paste. Next thing that we need to do is we need to copy this section as well. Okay, then let's try to go back here. Okay. From members, okay. Now, notice by the way that we have here our ID as CTR, then members per email address is equals to this one. Okay, I'm just trying to format my information. Okay, I'm going to use this time the AND statement. So password is equals to question mark as well. Next thing that I need to do is I need to specify also that it's also a string. So I'm going to specify here S. Then, okay, I'm going to comma, then password. Okay. Now, for email address, I'm going to add another field. Okay, I'm going to call this one as password. Okay. Then, as well as this one, password. Now, since going back to our registration page, so notice by the way that I encrypted my password. So I also need to encrypt my password on my login. So I'm going to use MD5. Okay. Then that's it. Okay, so the rest would actually still be the same. Now notice by the way guys that I am being lazy. Okay, so we talk about being lazy in terms of being a programmer. It means you're trying to cut your work in half the time, or you do your work in half the time. What do you mean by that? So if there's no need for us to code, if you can just recycle your code, just try to recycle your code. You don't need to code it word by word, letter by letter. If you can just copy and paste, then do so. Okay, what is important is you can understand what you're copying and pasting. So like for example, since I know where to put my password, I also added here my uh, and keyword. So I just basically added my and keyword, then tried to use equals. I also added my string since it's basically string. Then I also encrypted. So that's it. Those are some of the things I added. So I didn't copy blindly my code on my previous file. I also need to understand what I'm currently copying. So when you try to copy, make sure that you also try to understand what you're copying. So it cuts your time in half, but at the same time also, you are also trying to learn by trying to understand what you're basically copying. Okay, so next thing that we need to do is we need to specify what are the fields that we want to get. So like for example here we want to get ID, then for first name, then last name, contact number, address, email address. Okay, and okay, let's try to check. Oh, that's 1 2 3 4 5 and 6. Going back here to our shopping cart, to try to open our PHP admin. So first name 1 2 3 4 5 6. Okay, so you have 6 columns that we wanted to use. Because we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Now, we also need to specify it here on our, in order for, we need also to bind it. Okay, so we have our ID, first name, last name, contact number, address, and last we have email address. Okay, so we're trying to bind everything on our prepared statement. Okay, so this is it. We don't need to specify actually CTR. Okay, let's try to use CTR this time. Let's also try to do that. Okay, we have here ID. Okay, count ID CTR. Okay, so why did we add? Try to arrange it first so that it will be easier for us to check it later. It will also make our codes a lot neater. Okay. Okay. So going back here at somewhere at the bottom. Now, why did we still use CTR? Okay, let's try to add here CTR because we deleted it a while ago. Okay, so why did we still use CTR? Because we still basically wanted to get the number of rows returned. So we only want, the proper way of doing this, we only need a single row. If it's 0, then there must be an issue because we cannot find that particular email address. If it's more than 1, if it's greater than 1, there's a logical error on the system. It means that that on the registration process, it's not properly filtered or it's not properly checked. That's why we only need to specify here 1. So we only need 1. Okay, so let's try it out. Echo, then CTR. Okay. So I have to go back to our page. Okay, so we have here try to reload the page just in case there's a, okay, so you have a sample. Going back here, the address. Okay, let's try to open our inspect. Okay, so we have here 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so I have to click login. Then say to click console, debugger, network. Okay, log in again. Okay, it's not triggering anything yet. Let's try to debug our code this time. Going back to our index, here button login. Okay, let's try to alert. Try to just create a simple alert. Alert notice. This is just to make sure that every time we try to click our button login, it's going to fire. Okay, going back here, reload the page, then login. Okay, so it means it's properly firing. Okay, there must be some error. Okay, so because we have here registration, so we don't want that. We just need to click login. Okay, select login process that I'm, by the way, guys, on index.php. So we have here process.login.php. Then we have here email address. Okay, try to change again email. Okay. Okay. Then let's try to delete. Let's just try to. Okay. Okay, let's try to add this one for debugging purposes again. Status. Going back here. Okay, let's try to reload the page and click login. Okay, success, post process.login, cookies, request, response. Okay, no response data available for this request. Okay, so let's go back to our code. Go back to process.login. It's equals to 1. Okay, so to put it outside first. Try to add text. Count. Currently, by the way, we're trying to debug everything. This is also one way of for you guys to learn how to debug your code. That's why I don't prepare my lessons and just try to copy it out, try to make it perfect, because I also want you to experience how to debug your code properly. Okay, going back here, decide to reload the page again, then click login, success, press login. We have count 0. So there seems to be an issue with our code. So we cannot find, could be the password. Okay, let's try to specify, make it 123, log in. Okay, click OK. Then this is the last part, cookies request, response 1. Okay, so it means if it's 1, then this particular email with this particular password is actually found on our members table. Okay, this time what we need to do, okay, let's try to delete. What we need to do is try to do a simple redirect. But where do we need to redirect it? Okay, the first thing that we need to do is we need to create another file, okay, called dashboard. Okay, going to click new, file, save as, then we have here dashboard.php. Okay, so we already have our dashboard.php. Okay, so let's just try to put a label here first. This is just a way for us to identify that, okay, so we're inside our dashboard already. So h1 dashboard. Okay, this is not yet final, by the way, guys. This is more of just an identifier that, as what I've said, we are currently inside our dashboard already. Okay, let's try to go back here, reload the page. Okay, go back to our code first. Okay, process login. Okay, so what else do we need to do? Okay, let's try to create this time our session. Okay, we have your session start. Now, what is a session? Session is also a way for us to store information or data on our so that it can be passed from a browser to browser, from browser to the different tabs of a browser. Okay, so what we need to do, so try to use this one, session. Okay, so we already started our session. Okay, let's try to create a session variable. Session. Okay. ID. Okay, so you have your $ID. Okay, so since we'll basically be returning this one, it will be stored on our session. Okay, then decide to use this one if not equals to empty, session ID header location dashboard.php. Then we have here exit as well. Okay, we can just delete this part. Okay, so what's the logic behind this code? So let's first try to start our session. Then we will be storing our session or the ID that has been returned from our query on our session variable. Okay, let's try to add another. Okay, session. Session ID equals to. Okay, we have our session ID. So this is just a randomly generated session ID. Okay, so every time you close your tab or every time you terminate your session, a new ID will be generated. Then we have here our session ID, which is taken from this code. Okay, so if it's not empty, if the session ID is not empty, so we will be redirected to our dashboard. Let's try to check if it's going to work. Let's try to go back first to our index. Okay, alert status. Success. Okay. Try to, instead of register, let's try to call it login. You have successfully logged in. Okay. Then let's try to go back to our code. Okay. Let's try to test it out. Log in. You have successfully logged in. Okay. It didn't. Okay, so we have your dashboard, but we didn't redirect. So we did not redirect. So we should be able to redirect. The logic is we should be able to redirect, but we didn't redirect. Okay. Let's try to go back here first. Log in. Okay. Try to delete this part. Okay, let's try to do something else. Okay. Go back here to our index. Okay. Try to use this one again. Then dashboard.php. Now, for our dashboard.php, let's try to add a simple code. Okay. On the topmost part, when you try to add, by the way, your session, there should be any space in between. So what do you mean by space in between? So let's say, for example, there's a gap here. Okay. There's a space here. So it's going to generate an error. So it should be something like this. There's no spaces, there's no space in between. Okay. So let's try to see if let's try first to start our session. Session start. Okay. Then if dollar session ID, try to check if it's empty. If it's empty, header location your index.php and exit. Okay, so that's the logic behind it. Okay, so need to check it first. Okay, so let's try it out this time. Going back to our page, we need to reload the page, then log in. You have successfully logged in. Okay, so I'm inside my dashboard. Okay, let's try to check this time our session ID. Okay, session ID echo. Okay, so we did this one to display our session ID. Okay, let's try to go back here. Variables, we have here 1. So we have our sample at test@email.com. So we have 1. Okay, let's try to check if for Scotty Pippen. Okay, so to go back here. Okay, try to paste, then log in. Should be okay. You have successfully logged in. Click OK. Then you have 2. Okay, so that's how you would make your login page, or that's one way of creating your login page. So basically everything is a lot of the things have been done using our JavaScript, such as redirection and as well as our alert. These are just a simple method of doing things using JavaScript or jQuery JavaScript and PHP. Okay, so for our login, this is actually our login. So what we need to do is we need to store all of the values, by the way, on our session variable. Okay, so we already have stored the ID. Okay, let's try this time. Okay, like for example, our first name. So again, let's try to be lazy. Okay, last name. So why is it that I'm storing the values that I initially taken from my row or from my members table into my session, so that I no longer need to query every time I need this data. Okay. Uh, it also actually takes away certain weight on the database. Okay, contact, delivery address, then last we have our email address. Okay, so this is actually um, a way for us to store values or store the values we have queried from our database to our session variables. So we're already done with our registration, and we're also done with our login. Now, next section, by the way, what we're going to do is we are going to create our logout page and try to work on our admin page. So for our admin page, that's where we will be adding our products, as well as trying to control uh, our users. We'll also be seeing all of our users on into our in our admin page.